Tranquility du Jour, March 12th, 2019. Restore and reflect while nurturing your creative spirit at a gorgeous secluded villa nestled on an Italian hilltop. Indulge in daily yoga, Tuscan cuisine, a Puccini opera, and the magic of Cinque Terre. Join me this July for Tranquility in Tuscany. Learn more at kimberlywilson.com/Italy. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to the 447th edition of Tranquility du Jour, a podcast featuring artists, activists, and authors making a difference around the globe. In this week's edition, we're chatting with Ellen Grace O'Brien, discussing her new book, The Jewel of Abundance, along with the 4 universal goals of life, how to shift our minds from worry to worship, doesn't that sound amazing, and a roadmap for abundant living. For anyone new to Tranquility du Jour, there's a link in the show notes to find out more, and also a link to join our Love Notes that come out every week to every other week, and also gives you access to Tranquil Treasures, which is an assortment of MP3s, PDFs, and videos. Now, before we hear from Ellen, I wanted to mention a few things that are upcoming. So first of all, a big thank you to everyone who tuned in on Friday night, International Women's Day, for the Year of Tranquility Book Launch Fete. It was so fun to spend a Friday night with you. I really, really enjoyed it. And I've actually posted that replay for everyone to kind of watch and follow along. It was supposed to be an hour and it went 75 minutes. So my apologies for going over. I was quite long-winded. I feel like I could have gone for another hour. But anyway, I'm going to post that in the show notes also, which you can find at kimberlywilson.com/447. But you can also find it over on the blog or on YouTube. So even if you don't have the book, I hope it will be inspiring for you. And if you do have the book, hopefully it's just another perk added to the other bonuses. Thank you guys so much for supporting Year of Tranquility. Now, one of the things that came up during the call was people asking, what about the daybook? What's going on with the daybook? And I wanted to let you know that I have the latest draft in my Dropbox from my graphic designer that I need to review. And our hope is to get it out within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. I'll definitely let all of you know, and it will be available on Amazon. And then also a heads up that the tickets for TDJ Soiree happening here in Washington, D.C. on June 9th, which is a Sunday, from 10 to 6. It is going to be maybe an annual event, but definitely this is the first one. So an experience of really kind of basking in the Tranquility du Jour lifestyle. So we're going to have vegan food. We're going to have, of course, goodie bags. We're going to have a swanky, beautiful setting. We're going to have 5 modules of programming, a Tranquility pop-up, a little mini fashion show. So the idea behind this really is to take a day to nourish our souls, our spirits, and also to, learn as much as we can kind of about what it is we want, how best to grow, and what it is we're looking for. It's like this idea of really pushing the pause button on your busy life, but doing it in a setting filled with like-minded people. I have to say, the people who have already signed up are so amazing. Like, I'm so excited. And so grab your tickets. There's general admission and then there's VIP. And you can find out all the information for this over at kimberlywilson.com/soiree. Also a heads up that the Tranquility in Tuscany is the early bird ends on Friday, and that will save you $150. So if you are contemplating coming on over to Tuscany with me in July, would love to have you. There's 5 spots left, and early bird again ends on Friday. And so that will allow you to save the additional amount. And there's a link to that in the show notes, or of course, just head on over to kimberlywilson.com/Italy. Check it out. It's a private villa. It's yoga, creativity, and mindfulness. And it's probably the last Italy retreat I'll do, at least for a few years. So if you are interested in Italy, please come on out, because it's going to be it's a really, really divine experience. And one of the highlights is on Wednesday. So it's a week-long experience. But on Wednesday, we take a day trip to Cinque Terre, which, if you don't know Cinque Terre, Google it. It is stunning, absolutely phenomenal. And all of this is included in the retreat cost. So it's just a wonderful kind of adventure and escape. Also, those of you who like online events, our next TDJ Live, which is a free 1-hour event, is happening Sunday, March 24th. And there's a link in the show notes to sign up for that. Also, I've got 2 fun Pigs and Pugs project events coming up. One is April 28th, where you get to meet a pig. And then we're meeting at a wine bar. And you are welcome to bring pugs. You're welcome to bring any animal that you may have. Well, probably not like a goat or what have you, but you know what I mean. Any dog that you might have. And it should just be a really sweet event. And it's $25. And then Yoga and the Animals, which is an annual event, and that is happening June 8th. So those of you who are interested in TDJ Soiree, if you wanted to make a weekend of it and you're coming in from out of town, join us on the 8th at Burleigh Manor Animal Sanctuary, and then on the 9th for the soiree. And now Ellen. Ellen Grace O'Brien is the author of The Jewel of Abundance. She's a yogacharya, which is an esteemed yoga teacher, a radio host, and an award-winning poet who weaves poetry into her teachings on spiritual matters, pointing to the mystical experience beyond words and thought. Ordained by a direct disciple of Yogananda, she's been teaching Kriya Yoga philosophy and practice nationally and internationally for over 3 decades. Welcome, Ellen.
Thanks, Kimberly. It's great to connect with you.
Congratulations on your new book, The Jewel of Abundance, Finding Prosperity Through the Ancient Wisdom of Yoga.
Well, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to you about it. And I've enjoyed the whole process, writing it, sharing about it, and seeing it, come into manifestation is wonderful.
Isn't it? It's such a delight whenever you hold it in your hands. You're like, oh my gosh, this is mine.
Yeah, but it's a lot. Even like a child or a work of art or something. You do, it kind of comes through you, don't you think? And then when you see it, you recognize it, but you don't, because it seems like there's a spirit, that shines through the work that is also a surprise even to the author, I think.
I agree. Sometimes I'll read something I've written, or I'll read to someone something they've written, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, should I write that? Wow. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, wow, that was really good, about their own piece. And it's just funny, right? You forget, you're like, that was kind of genius.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your yoga journey that led you to write this new book, The Jewel of Abundance.
Well, my journey began in a way, that was, I thought was, uniquely me, but later I discovered it's just how it is for most people, which is, I seem to have all the ingredients for, what would make a person happy in life. But I had this kind of sense of something missing, this, which I felt is kind of a sadness, like a background, like I was looking for something, but I'd tried everything and I didn't know what it was I was looking for. Well, it turns out I was looking for myself. And, myself was not missing, but what was missing was my connection to myself, to that self with a capital S, the soul, nature, the essence. And so when I met my teacher, Roy Eugene Davis, who's an American yogi and a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, I was introduced, to the philosophy of yoga and its practices. And that really gave me the doorway that I needed, to make that deep connection to myself and, and then to begin to walk a path of spiritually awakened and spiritually conscious living. And so everything has come out of that.
You talk about 4 universal goals of life in this book. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Oh, sure. When we go, dive deep into the teachings of yoga and yoga philosophy, of course, we find they're emanating from the ancient Vedas. And there we find what is called the Purusharthas, which mean really, literally translated means for the sake of the soul. So there are 4 universal life aims. And the first is Dharma, which is becoming familiar to people today. People talk about, that's my Dharma, or, I'm looking for my Dharma, meaning, my purpose, what I'm going to do with my life. But really, Dharma has to do with the cosmic order of things and how we fit into that. And so Dharma, the first goal is to live with higher purpose. It's to live in connection with the conscious connection with the infinite. The second goal, which is the topic of my book, is Artha, which is wealth. And it's a very important goal in life, but often, people don't make the connection between Dharma and Artha, or living a spiritually conscious life and wealth and the resources that we need in order to do what we're here to do. So it makes a lot of sense. And it's beautiful to discover it as one of the 4 aims of life. And the third aim, which will be no surprise to you, Kimberly, is karma. We're here to enjoy life, right? Which I found so beautiful to be one of the 4 aims. We're here to prosper and to thrive and to enjoy life. And the final goal of the 4 is moksha, or a liberation, to know absolute freedom, enlightenment, to be fully awake in this lifetime. So those are the 4 goals, and they're meant to help us have a balanced, spiritually awakened, joyful, abundant, free life.
Which sounds amazing, by the way. So how do we get started on this path? And what are some of the practices that are really important pieces of this?
I think the fundamental practice that is critical to living a spiritually conscious life is some form of meditation, because meditation helps us drop into the experience of being the conscious witness. We can have the direct experience of superconsciousness, our spiritual nature. We can observe the mind rather than having to operate in a reactive mode from the mind. So in order to live more consciously, more joyfully, more spaciously, to be able to tune into intuition and discernment, we really benefit from a discipline that helps us purify the mental field and have it more illumined, so we can see, we can witness what's going on in there.
With the primary focus of the book being the Artha, tell us about how this connection between yoga and prosperity, because, as a yogi for the past 2 decades, it's funny, I never really thought about prosperity or even abundance. And I love that you have written a whole book kind of connecting this. So can you share a little bit more about how you even came about this connection and what it is?
Well, I didn't make it up, which is great. So it's right there, in the classic texts of yoga. I mean, starting from what I was just sharing with you about the Purusharthas, and that wealth and prosperity is one of the 4 basic aims of a spiritually conscious life. So there's that. And then there's a teaching which, yoga is and points to, that there's, one reality. We're all expressions of that. And yoga is conscious union, becoming aware of that which we are. So, at the foundation of that is life's tendency to thrive and to prosper and to unfold and to express itself. And, we're not separate from that. And that's the very basic teaching of yoga. So, prospering is inherent, to our very being. And then we find, the classic text that is studied by practitioners of yoga is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. And in there, he talks about experiencing abundance. And it's one of the yamas, one of the restraints that is advised for people who are cultivating an ethical, spiritually conscious life. And that teaching that he offers says, when a person is established in non-stealing, the jewels of abundance appear. And so, in the Yoga Sutra, we get these little aphorisms that we have to unpack. What does it mean to be established in non-stealing, and what is that abundance that appears? And it's also translated as jewels of abundance. So what is non-stealing, and what are the jewels of abundance that appear?
Yeah, what are the jewels of abundance that appear? And you're right. It's like, this this deciphering of, right, Patanjali sutras. You're just like, what did you mean? There's so many different ways to interpret them. I love one of my favorites is yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind, right? And it's that so often we think of yoga as asana, at least in the West. And yet, according to Patanjali, it is the cessation of fluctuations of the mind, right? So there's so many beautiful kind of nuggets deep within the sutras.
Absolutely. And this one on non-stealing, of course, when you dive deep into it, it really has to do with changing the mind from, an ego-based identity to being able to consciously abide in our essence of being, our true self, which is, unbounded, unrestricted, and abundant in its very nature. So it's about changing the mind from lack to abundance, from I, me, mine to a sense of a higher true self that is connected to all that is.
Now, you have a whole piece also on discipline. Do what pleases your soul. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because discipline is something that, of course, is hard for many of us. And how do you encourage us to turn this into kind of the discipline of really choosing delight as you write?
It's really the truth of discipline. It's just that we haven't really or we don't often, look at it in that way. We're kind of used to discipline being like something we don't want to do. So I noticed in teaching my yoga classes that, when we would be studying yoga philosophy, and one of the first practices of Kriya Yoga is self-discipline. And as soon as I would offer that, I would see, these bodies start to close down, like, okay, here we go. What's the regimen going to be? But when we think about the purpose of discipline, it is to support us in our health and our well-being, and also that we have an innate sense of the choices that we make that are going to be supportive of that, and choices that we make that are not. And so I call those choices that we make that are supportive of our well-being and the well-being of others and the planet as, that which pleases the soul. And we all really know that. I mean, we know when we're making a choice that that's not a useful choice, right? We have a little meter that goes off inside that, ding, ding, ding. And we might choose to override that. And so this discipline of delight, doing what pleases your soul, is sort of helping us tune into how we can have a soul-centered discipline, how we can tune into what we know has heart and meaning, what we know is going to serve the greater good. That's what I mean by that.
One other piece that I love that you have created, because I'm a big acronym girl, is center. And so I'm just going to read to it or read, how it's been defined by you, and then let's chat about it. So C, consider your intention and clarify your goals. Love. E, establish a consciousness of success. N, nurture your body, mind, and soul. T, think positively. E, enjoy your life as you cooperate with your unfolding potential and highest good. And R, remember you're a divine being. So what I love about this too is you say, ask yourself the following questions each day as part of the Center Formula checklist. And you go through these list of questions like, am I enjoying life? Are my thoughts positive? Have I carefully considered my intention? I love this. Acronyms are so helpful. So tell us a little bit about this, how you came up with it and how you use it in your life.
I think it was just, as you say, just going through the steps of, how do you establish yourself in making positive change, and it really has to do with, considering what you really want, establishing yourself in that conscious awareness of that. And, all the things that are important, nurturing yourself along the way, being able to cultivate positive thoughts. So, really for me, it was just a reflection of, okay, how do I change a habit? How do I cultivate, new behaviors that are going to help me live the life that, I like to say it this way. I like to live the life that is worthy of me, and support others in living the life that is worthy of them. And by that, I don't mean it in any judgmental way. I mean to live in a way that is consistent with the truth of your magnificence as a spiritual being.
And at the end of the chapter, you have to succeed, optimize your life, sanctify your days, make a sanctuary for the soul, build it with love, light it with peace, invite everyone in. Center yourself in yourself, capital S, nourish your body, open your mind, honor your soul, change your thoughts, soar beyond them.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful,
yeah.
Right? You're like, God, that was genius.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really a little poem, isn't it? And what I had written, just before that, this little part leading into that, what we really love. And, I had written, a successful life, a fully prospering life is only possible with the soul's joy and never without it.
Parts 5 is generosity, right? So live the prosperous life. So can you talk a little bit about how you encourage your readers and our listeners to lead a prosperous life?
A fundamental principle, of course, of leading a prosperous life is that it can't be selfish. It can't, and what I mean by that is it can't just be focused on what I want. If you really want to prosper, you have to get beyond the confines of just thinking of, your own self, and, think about the connection, to all of life, and that the whole prospering process comes through that, how we are connected, how we can serve, how we can share our love, how we can bring joy to others. And it doesn't necessarily, when I talk about prosperity, I find oftentimes people think it's doing something, start a business, that kind of thing. But it really has to do with our quality of being, with the joy that we can share with others, the compassion that we can share with others. And, those may naturally lead to actions, but, I think sometimes it gets reversed, and people think about, well, if I'm going to prosper and be generous, what am I going to do? I think we need to start with, how do I open my heart, right?
Yeah, because one of the pieces you also write about is that nothing contributes more to unfolding our divine potential than stepping out of our little corner and opening to abundance for uplifting others.
Yeah, because you get stretched. But I think it's good to, to start with, the inner life becoming to open. I thought when I first started practicing yoga, I thought it would be like a refuge from the world. It would take me out of the challenges of life and being in the world and struggling in relationship or work or, all of that. And so I had that kind of initial idea that yoga was, off to the ashram or up to the mountain cave. But I soon discovered that even though initially you do pull inward, yoga really is about being in the world and not out of it. It's really about living in the world with a new consciousness, with a new awareness, and the ability to make a positive contribution to life.
And, with prosperity, you're also talking about this idea, right, of wealth. And so, I think oftentimes when people hear the words prosperity or wealth, they think materialism. And whenever you define true wealth, though, how do you define it?
I define it as soul wealth, as being awake to the truth of what we are as spiritual beings. And then that the wealth is our ability to live fully, which includes our ability to attract or to create, what we need to fulfill our higher purpose in this lifetime. But we were early on talking about the jewel of abundance and the yogi who's established in non-stealing being able to attract the jewels of abundance. So when we look at, what are the jewels of abundance in our life? We may count certain material possessions that we have, but when we really look, we know that the jewel includes health, doesn't it? And well-being. It includes our relationships. People are jewels in our life. And so the jewel is not a material thing, but it is all that surrounds us, all that comes to us, that's part of being able to live fully.
And one of the pieces, too, with regard to living fully that you've mentioned a few times is joy. And so how do you encourage people to wake up to joy? So you have a piece about that in your book.
Well, in the Yoga Sutras, there's a fascinating teaching about happiness, which tells us to start from contentment. And that through the cultivation of contentment, which is really, being able to experience our own fullness, our own wholeness in any given moment, regardless of outer circumstances. So we do not allow outer circumstances to determine, how we feel. We start with our own sense of fullness, of wholeness. And then out of that, the sutra tells us, comes happiness, comes joy. So, most of the time, people have that reversed. I know I did. I thought, I will do this and I will accomplish that. And then, and from that, I'll have happiness. And once I have that happiness, I'll be content. But really yoga kind of turns that on its head, doesn't it? First start with what it is to experience your own inner wholeness, your own contentment. The nature of the soul itself is bliss. The nature of the soul is joy. And so, we learn not to be looking for joy outwardly, but to be experiencing it inwardly. That doesn't mean that we don't enjoy our life and that we don't enjoy people and things and circumstances. It just means that we understand that that's not the source of our joy.
Right. I like that. I think that's a good reminder. And, one of the pieces, too, that I really like is you encourage readers to turn their minds from worry to worship, right? So, this idea too with contentment, it's, I feel like kind of ties in with this also in joy. And so do you have any practical advice, on how we can turn our minds from worry, which, we're a pretty anxious society, into worship?
Yeah. I would go back to just, I always circle back to meditation. That's just, I need time, in the temple of the soul every day to give me a little distance and perspective from what the mind will throw up, as worry and concern. And, we can pay attention to that. Sometimes there's useful information there, but we don't need to be driven by that. So, we need that perspective. And then, I find that, when you have a dedicated practice and you begin to cultivate that kind of spaciousness in your heart and in your awareness, then you can observe, the worries that arise, but you don't have to get so involved with them, and there's so many beautiful techniques. You can, take a few minutes just to breathe and let the thoughts settle. You can practice affirmation and remind yourself of the deeper truth. You can practice gratitude, which is always a wonderful antidote to worry. Just reminding ourselves of how we're divinely supported at all times, whether we can see it or not.
And one piece too that you talk about that I love is life purpose. And what advice do you have for anyone who's having a hard time kind of finding their life purpose or connecting to their life purpose?
I like to look at life purpose in two parts. And, one is to point out this overarching dharma, or life purpose that we all have, which is, it's common, it's universal. We're all here to wake up, to know the truth about what we are as spiritual beings, to understand the nature of reality, the nature of life itself. So that's everybody's purpose. So we should all be about that. We should all be about waking up so that, we contribute to the evolutionary thrust, of being in an awakening world, a time of awakening. And, it's also helpful because, there's a lot of stress right now in our lives and in our world. And so sometimes if we can just step back and see that as being part of the evolutionary thrust of awakening itself, that's helpful. So there's that big thing of everybody waking up. And then there's, the individual's journey of finding, exactly what their particular unique purpose is. And, my main advice is to loosen the grip of having it be so much about what you're going to do, and first begin with how it would be for you to express more fully those divine qualities that have always been apparent in you. So I often advise people to look back into their childhood, who were they early on? What were the particular qualities that were evident? Some kids are, they just love animals, for example. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was in your history, and they just, that's just so important to them, the quality of compassion and caring. Others are, maybe they're more theatrical, they're, have that kind of a future actor energy about them, or they're more creative in the artistic mode, or there might be natural leaders or orators, So if you look back into your childhood, you can see certain divine qualities that were apparent, beauty, compassion, wisdom, creativity. And so once you start to claim those qualities and go ahead and find ways to magnify them now in your adult life, then whatever it is, I think that is ours to do is simply the vehicle for expressing those divine qualities.
So what would you say you hope that your average reader will take away from this book?
I would like everybody to know that, we are here to thrive. We're here to wake up, and we're here to thrive. And we're here, all of us, with the capacity to make a positive contribution to life. And that we have within us, that natural urge of the soul to express itself. And we can do that. And when we do, life becomes so much more enjoyable and delightful.
Beautifully said. And my last question for you, Ellen, is the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour. So I'm curious, how do you find tranquility in your everyday? I think you've definitely mentioned the importance of being still with oneself daily.
I like to experience tranquility as much as possible throughout my day. So I have pauses throughout my day. And it actually is something I talk about in the book too. Like, we have this consciousness app. I call it our consciousness app, which is always calling to us, throughout our day to pause and just to notice. And so one of the practices that I have is to notice my noticing. Like we just, maybe a bird lands in the garden, or, you're in the market and a baby smiles at you and there's something that just opens your heart and quiets your mind. And you feel that in that tranquility, you feel that essence of being. You're reminded of the truth of what you are. You're reminded of the truth of life. And so there are those tranquility moments that go on throughout the day. And so my practice is to be more and more aware of those.
I like that. Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you. It's really been lovely to connect with you. And I really appreciate the invitation to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
So you'll find in the show notes, KimberlyWilson.com/447. You'll find Ellen over on Facebook, Twitter, and at EllenGraceO'Brien.com. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to my new book, Year of Tranquility, eye candy on Instagram, love posting over there and sharing stories and whatnot, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Watch for more videos. We're actually going to be recording some videos on Saturday here at the Pink Palace on the capsule wardrobe, ways to wear it, and, an assortment of looks with the capsule wardrobe, the Tranquility capsule wardrobe. There's also a link to shop the new collection at tranquility.com, which is featuring our new color Burleigh, which is this really beautiful baby pink. And then also we have 8 new designs, which includes 2 darling t-shirts. Browse my 6 books, tranquility-filled e-courses, the podcast app, and read about my passion for animals. And finally, if you have a moment to pin a review on iTunes or share this podcast via social media, would be so grateful, or pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads. My hope is that we can continue to spread tranquility far and wide, and remembering that tranquility is not what we do on a yoga retreat, but actually how we live our lives every day. Wishing you a delightful week. Namaste.